Welcome to the Steve Noble Podcast. Tons of truth, lots of grace, but no sacred cows. Now, let the show begin.
Hey, welcome back. Great to be with everybody. Thanks for your time as always. So this will be interesting. I think the last time I had a student or a former student on the show might have been my own son. So I did the radio show live with Hayden, our oldest. He's the one that lives in San Francisco. And we also did a podcast together. A couple of years ago, I did a podcast called Who Is This SOB? And the point of that podcast was to engage some of the other most popular podcasts with a Christian perspective. So I played around with that one for about a year. But during the course of that, I had an opportunity to sit down with Hayden, our oldest, who's now 28. He's married. He's out in San Francisco. He's the one in the gaming industry. And that was awesome because he was comfortable enough to tell me exactly what he wanted to say. And there were a couple of really quite frankly, uncomfortable moments between myself and our oldest child. But it was a beautiful thing. It was very helpful, very healthy. But I don't often have guests on that are a whole lot younger than most of us. But in this case, it wasn't even my idea. Andrew Green is here and Dylan Mann is here. And they both took, Dylan actually took all 4 classes, right? Dylan, you took U.S. history, world history, civics, and ethics.
Yes, sir.
Andrew officially took civics, ethics, and world history and sat in U.S. history a lot. So they've both been in pretty much in all 4 of my classes, and we've known each other for 3 or 4 years now. And a couple of weeks ago, they emailed me and said, "Hey, Mr. Noble, could we be on your podcast?" And I'm always open to different ideas for the podcast, of course. And I'm sure, yeah, what do you want to talk about? And they really wanted to talk about their experience in these classes. So just to make sure everybody understands, I didn't ask for this. I didn't set this up. They asked for it. And so that's what led to this conversation today. And then because I take advantage of things as often as I can, last week we had a fundraiser and Andrew and Dylan were kind enough to come out and had one other student that shared with a room full of people that are my supporters and people that back the ministry and donate. And these guys were willing to share there and they're willing to share today, but I appreciate you guys being on, Andrew and Dylan. It's nice to see you guys. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you for having us. Yeah, I mean, we've been in your class forever. We missed it. We miss it now.
Yeah, we do.
That didn't take very long. We only finished up the first week of May.
Yeah, well, time changes. And, sometimes it's hard to accept that change.
Yes.
How good something is till it's over.
Right. That's exactly right. That is a lesson that you're learning early. And just for the record, both Andrew, who's on the left, and Dylan's on the right, if they stood up, I don't think Dylan's head would not be in the shot and Andrew's would. But Andrew and Dylan both just finished high school. Are you guys 18 or how old are you now?
I'm 19.
I'm 19 as well.
You're both 19. Okay. So, and then Andrew's heading off to Texas Tech. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Texas Tech.
Texas Tech. And then Dylan, I'm not sure what you're doing next. What's going on next for you?
We're trying to figure it out right now. We're in the process of figuring it all out.
Yep, which is fine. And I've probably talked about this in class. I don't think college is necessarily the default position for everybody that finishes high school. It is a way. It's not the only way. And a lot of times prior to, how did the world survive the last 6,000 years without everybody going to college? Obviously, we did. So you'll figure it out, and I'll be praying for you, of course. All right. So Andrew and Dylan, both of you guys, you emailed me. So what kind of got you to the point where like, hey, Mr. Noble, can we do the podcast with you? What kind of brought that up?
So since March and stuff, me and him been hanging out consistently, like almost every single week and stuff. And once school finally finished and it hit us, oh wow, we're done. We don't ever have to go back to high school. We don't have to ever drive back to Hark. We were just sitting down talking about classes one day at a campfire, and we were just talking to his dad about that because his dad is asking us, "Where'd y'all meet?" We're like, "Oh, we met in Mr. Noble's class 3 years ago. And we were just sitting there and we just started talking about the good times we had there. And we were like, "Do you remember he does that podcast?" And he was like, "Yeah." And we were like, I wonder if he would ever have us on that and stuff. So it's just kind of what sparked our mind into thinking about that. Because like also,
Yeah, but
we were
go
just
ahead.
we were just talking about like like your teaching style is much different than what you find in other teachers nowadays, especially like all kinds. Like you look at every single perspective. No, I haven't had any other teacher do that. They don't look at any other perspectives. You look at everything from every situation.
Yeah, and so that's I want to unpack that today with you guys, because what's important, and we'll put this out there on all the regular podcast channels and on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and all that stuff. But I'm actually going to send it. There's about 1,600 families I'm communicating with that I've met through these homeschool conventions the last year and a half. And a lot of people that go to homeschool conventions, their kids aren't yet in high school. That tends to skew a little bit younger. And so I was communicating with them. I sent out an email just this morning and told them that I was going to be doing this podcast with you guys, and I was going to share it with them, because I want these folks to hear your perspective. And again, this is Dylan and Andrew's idea. I didn't ask them to do it. They asked me if they could, and it's a pleasure to do it. But yeah, getting your perspective on, like you were talking about, Andrew, what's so different about the class. So there's, kind of the material itself. I want to talk about that a little bit, kind of the way that we talk about the material, different perspectives, like you were talking about, Andrew, what the environment is like in there, whether you're somebody that would call themselves a Christian like you do, Andrew, or somebody that would say they're not a Christian like you would say, Dylan. And obviously I'm a strong Christian with strong opinions. So how does that, how does all that work? And also want to try to dig out a few other things about these classes that were helpful for you guys and effective for you guys. Because if it's not impactful, then I'm not doing it right. So if somebody were to ask both you guys, and I want you both to answer this question, what are Mr. Noble's classes like? How do you answer that?
Very open and discussional based. That is one like the first thing that comes to my mind is open and discussion based. You can bring any topic up, any different side, to a piece of anything from history, civics to ethics, and it will just turn into a discussion on why you first believe in that, and then what does the Bible have to say about that.
Yeah, I feel like you're talking with us. You're not talking at us. I feel like it's mostly an open discussion the whole time. If we have something that we want to say about it, you're very open to talking to us with that.
Yeah, I did a interview just like 2 hours ago with a guy that you've probably heard me say his name in class numerous times. I'll mention every once in a while, Barna Research. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, sir.
BARNA. Barna Research. So that's George Barna. I just did an hour-long interview with him a couple hours ago. And he was talking about, because he just wrote a book about, it's called Raising Spiritual Champions. And I was asking him, okay, we got all these problems. We know that kids are walking away from the faith, or people just don't have any kind of moral center. They're all over the place. They're all over the map with their beliefs. Morality in America is obviously on the decline. And so how do we deal with that as parents? And one of the things that he brought up is called the Socratic method. That's referencing Socrates. And the Socratic method is what you're describing, Dylan. It's conversation. And Andrew, you brought this up as well. It's like, oh, really? That's an interesting perspective. Why do you think that? And that, you said that was, did you say that was really abnormal, Andrew, in terms of all the classes you've taken?
Yes, sir. I mean, I was in public school for 1 year, and even in that year, in my history class, like, you could not make it discussional based no matter what, because first and foremost, the teachers there, they have a certain agenda they have to follow, because they got to get this stuff done by the state law. So they just don't usually take discussions at all. They'll just nod their head or maybe give you like a quick 5 seconds sentence answer and then just move on.
Yeah.
So it's nothing.
Yeah. Well, and what about for you, Dylan?
I mean, yeah, I never really had a teacher that would actually talk with me about anything. If you brought anything up, either they didn't want to hear it or they didn't really pay any attention to it. With you, if I brought something up, and most of the time we disagreed in your classes. Sure. And so whenever we disagreed, you would talk with me about it. Either we would agree to disagree, or I usually found myself wrong. And we would just talk through it, and we would take 15, 20 minutes out of class just to talk about it. You never had a set schedule that you had to follow. You were always willing to go on different paths if we needed to.
Yeah. And you mentioned this last Thursday night, Andrew, and this is how I try to operate in every single class every week. is that if God opens a door for us to have a conversation that has nothing to do with the subject matter, or we're going to stop and park on something that has something to do with the subject matter, I'm not married to the slides. So if I have to, you guys have all seen me in class, like blowing through forget that one, forget it, just blow through it, because you have to adjust every once in a while. And I think that's super helpful when you can stop and take the time to engage. Was it helpful for you guys to hear when I did that with other people?
Yes, sir, it was. I mean, it brought us it gave us an answer to a question we didn't have. It was like, it would be something we thought about or I thought about, and I just forgot about it, and it would just pop back in my head once he said that, or someone asked that question. I'd be like, oh, that's right. That's true. Like, I was like, I'd be curious to hear what you had to say about it.
Yeah, because when you're in that environment, it's kind of like when you're at a party or at a social gathering and you hear people talking all over the place, and then something will catch your attention. And you're like, huh? And you'll literally start eavesdropping. And then if you're bold enough, you'll actually insert yourself into the conversation. But, a lot of my students are an increasing number. Most of them are still in person, but a growing number of them are online. And like the classes that you guys took down at Hark, which is at a big church here in the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area, the other classes I teach are up here at our house, which you guys have both been up here, right, Dylan? I know you've been here. Andrew, have you been here?
No, sir, I haven't been.
Okay, so it's up in our bonus room, but it's the same basic environment, same topic, same syllabus, same teacher, different students, but you guys are all male and female. They're all in the same basic age range, but those are the classes that I teach here are the ones that I film. And then those are the classes that my online students get every Friday. And I can't can those classes and sell them for the next 5 years, because you mentioned before we got on the air, Andrew, that when you took civics, that was 2020 when we walked into not only COVID, but that fall we had the presidential election with Trump and Biden and all the other crazy stuff that happened. And so that, yeah. And so my online students are like sitting there because they're not in the live class, but they're going to hear other students like you guys having conversation. That's why I asked you guys, was it beneficial, Dylan? Like when you heard other students ask questions and me engaging them, or sometimes it was more of a roundabout, even if you didn't talk, was that helpful for you just to hear that conversation going on?
Most definitely. And I feel like whenever you're having conversation with other students, it causes me or Andrew to chime in and we'll add questions to the question that was already stated.
Right. Yeah, because it's like a snowball going downhill. It tends to pick up more steam as it goes. What about, were you guys excited about any of these subjects? Or were you like, oh yeah, okay, I gotta go take civics, or I gotta take world history? How did you feel about the subjects when you first came into class? And then once we got going, how'd you feel about it?
Civics and world history for sure. I kind of just felt like I was just kind of put into it. I mean, but I was excited for civics because I did Teen Pact. Like that.
Oh, yeah.
And you came over there to speak one day. And this is how I first heard your name and stuff. And you opened up.
I didn't know that. Okay, this is new information for me.
Yes, sir. You spoke there and you opened up with the question, does anybody know how much debt the U.S. is currently in? And I think I gave the closest answer, which was 25 trillion at the moment. This was like 4 or 5 years ago. So, it's obviously
pretty good.
Grown.
You're a little low now, yeah.
I got this book that was what was it? No Sacred Cows, I believe.
You mean my book?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir. So I read part.
Oh, because I asked somebody, and then whoever was closest, I gave them a book.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool.
So then I read part of the book, but also I just loved the way you were just talking and stuff. So I felt like very, very informed the entire time you were talking. I went home, told my parents about it. Showed them the book. My dad, once I was done with the book, he started reading it himself. He's like, he knows what he's talking about and stuff. So then my parents were just like, well, you need to take civics. And we signed you up for Mr. Noble's class. I was like sitting there like, who's Mr. Noble? And the one who gave you the book. I was like, oh, yeah. But then ethics, I was actually very interested. I wanted to take that class so much because I was like, I wanted to hear what you had to say. And then also like, if I brought my point of view up, what would you have to say about that?
Yeah.
And then also, I grew up in a very secular world. I mean, like my family's very Christian and stuff. But growing up, I did a lot of sports, a lot of activities, like non-homeschool activities. So I grew up in a very secular world with very secular friends. So, I always had these people like asking me questions and stuff, finding out new stuff that my parents they try to shelter you from it, but they can't. They know it's the
Mm-hmm.
world. You're gonna find out about stuff. So, but it's just at that young of an age, you just don't feel comfortable asking them these types of questions.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I wanted to hear what like you had to say about like if I came up and asked one of these like secular questions I have been asked before.
And how did that go for you?
Like
As you took ethics, how was that class for you? And then Dylan, I want you to answer that question too.
it was good. I mean, it was good. I always kind of felt like you thought I was just trying to mess with you and stuff, but I mean, I was just trying to always just be informed. Like every single class, me and Chris would get there early,
Yeah.
and we would just be talking about like, oh, what are we going to talk about today? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to try to bring up this point of view, this point of view. Like, how would this look to someone else? Especially when he got into like the transgender stuff.
Yeah.
I would always try to bring that up because when I swam and stuff, I had some people I knew who were trying to transition. I mean, one time I almost got into a fight with someone who was trying to transition because they were in the girls' locker room.
Oh boy.
And I was just like, they overheard me say that's not right of them to be doing that. They're obviously a dude trying to impersonate a girl, and he got mad at me for that, and he trying to get in my face. So and this is when I was like 14 or 15, so at a young age and stuff.
Yeah. 5 years ago, that it gets very real for you, and it's actually happening where you're at, and in the swimming pool and in the locker room.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, nobody would have had your experience. Now, I think it's pretty common.
Oh, yes, sir. I mean, even it was a girl who came up and told me that. She was like, I just don't feel comfortable in there with that guy and changed.
Sure. Well, yeah. Yeah, because she's actually having a natural reaction based on the realities of life. Dylan, I mean, for you, which it was a new, I think you mentioned this last week, because for years, probably 10 years in a row, and you guys saw me do this, right? When I would basically say somebody's going to pray at the end of every class. You guys remember that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I dreaded that in civics.
Yeah. And so, and it was a couple years ago, it wasn't that long ago, where I just felt God was saying, okay, you don't actually know where any of these students are in their journey. Faith, no faith, somewhere in between. And because I'm a pretty aggressive person, and literally eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I was going to force everybody in the room to pray. But then God just got a hold of me. He's like, Steve, you don't know where anybody's at, actually. And you might be forcing somebody to do something that's completely not where they're at, which is very unloving of me. And so that was really on the fly. It was the very first day of class. I think probably one of the classes at my house, where I said, okay, here's how I used to do it. I'll ask for volunteers still, but if you don't want to, and just let me know and email me. And Dylan, you emailed me. So from your perspective, as somebody that would not claim to be a Christian, what's that been like for you? Because you and I have spent some time together outside of class, hanging out at Starbucks and talking about stuff. And you would ask questions from a certain perspective that I was always aware of. Because I knowing you as long as I have, even early on, I'm like, hey, is Dylan Mann a Christian? I would have been like, I mean, he's in here, he's in the Christian environment, but yeah, I don't know that he's actually a Christian. And then obviously you got to the point where you were willing to share that with me, but why would a non-Christian or somebody that's curious and has a lot of questions, why would you want to be in a class with a major Bible thumper like me? Like, how did that work for you?
I think it makes class almost more interesting, to be honest, because we disagree on almost everything we talk about. Thusly, there's more conversation to be had. I mean, going into your class, I was a little bit hesitant because I've heard a lot about you. I heard that you were very strict in your ways and you were very confident in yourself. So I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. But once I got to know you, it was the most fun class I ever had, all of them, because again, we disagree on everything and everything would turn into a conversation. And then along with that, we also had a relationship outside of class. You would meet with me and I would ask you more personal questions I couldn't ask in front of a class.
Sure.
And you were always willing to meet with me and you were always willing to answer the questions. And then you'd ask me hard questions as well that I didn't usually have the answers to.
Yeah. Were you surprised that it worked out well given our differences?
Yes and no. Because at first I would have been, but once I got to know you, I wasn't. Because I got to know the kind of person you were and that you really cared about us and that you didn't really care. You do care, but you're not concerned about if we agree with you or not. You're just happy that we're in the class and you can witness to us. So, no. because you're caring more about us.
Yeah, that's always one thing that I hope comes across, because I say it every once in a while in class. I'm like, hey, you guys, I'm here because I want to be here, and I'm here because whether you believe it or not, I actually care about you. I actually love all you guys, and I hope that comes across. I know it can, to some people that might sound kind of cheesy, but I think after you've been in class with me long enough that that comes from my heart. That's not me throwing a line at you. That's actually how I feel about you. Did you guys come to that understanding yourselves?
Yes, sir.
In terms of how I see you?
Yes, sir. I mean, even though sometimes like you were speaking very aggressively and stuff, it
Uh-huh.
still came off compassionate, and you wanted the best, and you wanted to show us the best and treat us the best way you could. It never came off like you're wrong and you're small-minded for thinking that. It always came off like you may be wrong, but I see where you might be wrong with this one, like where you went wrong with this one. It was always very compassionate, loving, well spoken. It never truly felt like you were trying to dig at us or anything.
And you always heard us out. You never cut us off or you always heard out our whole thought, our whole statement, and then you would talk to us about it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most enjoyable parts of class is the opportunity to have those conversations. Because if you go back and study Socrates and Plato, and if you go back into Greek and Roman times, I mean, that's what the smartest people in the community did. They hung out all day and they had conversations and they batted things back and forth, and they would come in with different perspectives, and then let's work through that and have a conversation. And I think that's really important from a learning perspective, and to get your brain functioning correctly so that you're consuming information, yes, but now you got to process it and think about it. And do I agree with this? And what's my position? And well, I think this. And then, if I take a different position or somewhat near yours, then you're still working. It's like going to the gym. It's like training on the basketball court.
I mean,
you got to exercise.
Yes, sir. It's funny you actually say that. I got one of my friends. He grew up like agnostic, did not believe in Christ at all. I mean, he didn't believe in him, but he acknowledged that there may be a presence of him.
Yeah.
He moved from Colorado to here, like 2018, and like since then we've been good friends. He was like one of my best friends swimming and stuff. But then past 2 years been rough for him. His family got divorced and stuff. But he found Christ in those past 2 years. And he's actually opening up his Bible and stuff, reading it. And now he's attending Cornell University for architecture. But like since 2018, he's always been a very well-spoken, thinks before he speaks kind of guy, well-educated guy. He's a bookworm. So, me and him are complete opposites. I'm extroverted. He's introverted. Like anything you think about me, he's a complete opposite of me.
Wow.
But like,
so he would be quiet in class.
Yes, sir. He would be very quiet. He would sit there and listen. I mean, the one thing we do have both in common is our aggression. We both will be very aggressive for things. So, but like that's like what we've been doing since like 2020. Like when we first got into our own political ideologies and stuff, we would talk about those through. We would talk about like, why do I believe in this? Like pro-choice and pro-abortion stuff. Like at first, he was pro-choice. Now he's pro-life. But like we just sit downstairs in his basement. We were playing a card game, Yu-Gi-Oh. I still don't know how to play it to this day, really. But we just sit downstairs and we just talk about like all this stuff. And like he was a very philosophical guy. He loved reading old ancient history. So did I. So we would just sit there, talk, and I feel like it's always the most like learning atmosphere ever. Like he's architecture at Cornell. I'm political science at Texas Tech. But like when I went up there to go visit him, he showed me everything. Like we sat there and discussed the differences in architecture, and it made me interested in actually learning it. And I mean, I learned. Cool. I went there this past week, and I like sat there and I talked about I found out new stuff about buildings I never knew. Like there was masculine and feminine buildings, and I found that so intriguing. But it's just like I was like, it's just like we're sitting there talking. I feel like I'm learning the most truly when I'm actually having a conversation with someone. Just to like back up what you said, like. It truly is much more, and I've always been more of a visual learner, not like a listening learner and stuff. But when we're having conversations and stuff, like it helps me so much. Like I could come home from your class and I would still remember everything because we actually talked everything through instead of going to sit in class and sit down for 3 hours. Like sit down in a class for 3 hours. Right. I mean, even there was one other teacher that was very similar. When I took chemistry with her, she tried to make it a discussion based. and that was probably one of my highest scoring classes of all time because she made it discussion based. It is so much more useful. It is a much better teaching style.
Yeah, that's cool. Dylan, do you have any friends, anybody that you run with that is willing to or likes to have deeper kind of conversations and chew through positions and what you think?
Probably just Andrew, to be honest. Me and
Yeah.
Andrew, we talk about everything we discuss. Anything from beliefs to just our day-to-day lives. But I feel like you've helped us a lot with that because whenever we go and do something, we always think, what would Mr. Noble think of this? Or whenever we talk about something, we're thinking to ourselves, I wonder what Mr. Noble's thoughts on this would be. Because the person who at least me, you're the person who's really got me to actually start thinking about things instead of just doing or just saying. You really make me think about things because I've never looked at the world the way you looked at it. I try to look at it in a way that you would look at it, which is thinking.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and asking those why questions.
Right.
Oh, how'd you get there? Why do you take that position? And most people don't do it. I mean, my generation does it a lot more than yours, but we had several friends over, Christian friends from church over. This was years ago, maybe 12, 13, 14 years ago. And you guys know me well enough. I love to have deep, profound conversations about different subjects, and I can play around and I can be a goofball, you know that as well. But if given the opportunity, I'm going to swim in the deep end of the pool, and I'll never forget this. This was another really mature Christian couple, and at one point the wife said, "Man, can we change the subject? I just can't talk about stuff this heavy for this long." And I'm okay, fine, be hospitable. But to me, I'm just like that doesn't compute for me. Because I'm always thinking, man, there's so much, and this is the way I was raised. There's so much to consider. There's so much to think about. There's so many weighty topics out there, and we live in serious times, and there's serious consequences. And yeah, I can have fun and play around and watch a movie and get distracted. But man, I just don't understand it that people don't want to talk about these things. But now we're in a situation because of these stupid things and social media, where most of the communication is happening digitally. And everybody's got keyboard courage, and very few people will engage like this.
Yes,
like
sir.
Just face to face.
I mean, even at this age, like I got, thankfully, like my group of guys that I swam with.
Yeah.
They were at first they were mostly like secular guys. Now they've kind of started leaning towards like the Christian worldview and stuff. Like I told you, my friend at Cornell, another friend who's going to Auburn. One guy who's at Johns Hopkins, he was the biggest liberal, and he was an atheist for the longest time. Like he tried to always downplay God. He was always trying to prove that he didn't exist and stuff. But I remember last year, my friend, his dad died, and the night of the funeral, we all decided like, hey, we're all just gonna hang out. We're gonna have talk. We're just gonna talk.
Yeah.
And we sat there we went to Jordan Lake, and we sat out there from like 8 to almost 12 o'clock at night. And we just sat there and talked about everything. And, there's so much life lessons you can learn from other people's point of view, other people's pain they've gone through, other people's tragedies, people's struggles, and, other people's just worldviews. There's so much you can learn from that. Like, I learned so much from my friend who was an atheist for the longest time. And
sure.
My other friend, he grew up as a Christian, but, as life moved on, his family kind of stopped going to church as much. And, he still felt a connection to God, but he just didn't go as much. And then when his dad started getting really sick and stuff before he died, all that kind of went out the window because, the worst is happening to you. You're watching your own father die. And, there's bringing struggles from that family. But I saw him keep his integrity as much as he could and his faith to God as much as he could. I would bring him to church and stuff. We'd always have questions at the end of service and stuff, and we'd just talk about it to each other. I mean, those questions right there, when you're having those conversations, they're just so much more impactful about anything.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
that's golden, and that's like in a class. Okay, we're going to talk about civics, or we're talking about world history or U.S. history, whatever. And oftentimes, I'm always kind of looking for, can you, and God has to do this, but I have to do my part. Can you get to kind of a pregnant moment where there's some point that can be made just to float it out there and see if somebody's like, Dylan, that would be something you might naturally grab onto. And just to kind of look for those moments to have those opportunities to go deeper, even if it's outside the subject matter in a classroom.
Yes.
I mean, I'd much rather go into that depth than just continue to try to get through the slides for the day.
I mean, yes, sir. I mean, one thing that always kind of stuck to me, especially when we're having these deep conversations, and the question would always come up: why do people do this, or like, what makes people do this and stuff? And I would always think about the classes and your two favorite words, human depravity. That would always just come to my mind. I was like, there's something called human depravity, and I basically got that stuck in my mind at this point. Whenever like to explain, and that's kind of like that's the intro I use to like get into these deep conversations with my friends and stuff, or like with anybody. Is just human depravity and stuff.
All right, I'm glad that came up because this is an email I got. A great friend, a husband and wife couple. They're very generous. They've been great supporters of the ministry, and they were there last Thursday night. So here's what she says. She sent me an email. Hi, Steve. Thank you for last night. As I was working out in the yard today, I thought of a question that I would have liked to have asked, but didn't think of it last night. When you shared about sharing world history and when you asked the students, why is world history what it is? They unanimously said human depravity. A question of intrigue on my part would have been, that is what Mr. Noble has taught you. Do you agree? Yes. I just remember, or do you agree with that? Because, how would you explain why I talk about human depravity, how I bring it into the class? So like I know the words, but why do I talk about that? Why do I factor that in? And what's your read on that? That's what I'm trying to answer her question. So it's not just you guys parroting what I said. How do you use that? Human depravity, sin nature, the fallenness and brokenness of mankind, however you want to phrase it. And you don't have to be a Christian to see that. Dylan, you know that just as well as Andrew does, that the world is a screwed up place. There's a lot of screwed up people. There's a lot of crappy stuff happening all over the place. Why do you think I make that a big deal? Like, what did you guys get out of the fact that now you use the phrase human depravity? Probably not as often as I do, but way more often than you ever did before.
I mean, it's just one of those things everybody has. I mean, no matter how good of a person seems to be or is, we all have it. Or how bad of a person someone is, we all have human depravity. It's always relevant and stuff. Like, I remember my dad, he's telling me, my granddad, I always grew up thinking he was the biggest Christian man in the world because he helped start this church. And I remember when he died, the day we were carrying his casket out, it felt like the entire county was there to see him. Everybody came up to me like, oh, you're Marion's grandson? He always spoke kindly of you. And as times moved on and stuff, my dad shed some more light to him. And like, he always wasn't that man. He was, he had to grow up and mature and stuff. My mom tells me, she's like, yeah, supposedly when he was younger, him and the sheriff went around the town and stuff and started shooting at random signs. And she was like, like one time my dad was like, he owned a liquor store at one point. And I was like, wait, really? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay. And I'm like, I'm sitting there, I'm just like, everybody has it in their life. It's always there. It's always present. You're always going to have like those thoughts come up. Like
everyone has temptations.
Mm-hmm. It's always going to come up.
Yeah.
Like, I could do this. I could go this way, or I could go this way. That's like, that's a big thing coming up for me right now is because, I'm going to college and I'm going to a secular school.
Yeah.
Like my first choice was Baylor. Baylor has, very strict rules and stuff. I mean, not as strict rules as some other schools, like Liberty.
But it's like a Baptist Christian university. Yeah.
I mean, they were actually, I was very impressed. They didn't shove it down your throat like other schools I've been to, but they were very unapologetically Christian. They were like, here's what we believe in and stuff, and here's how we're going to teach you with this worldview. I mean, but now I'm going to a secular school. There's like very little rules and stuff. Like I could have like, there's co-ed, like, the dorms are co-ed and stuff like that. I mean, so it's like one of those things like, I could go down this route of like, sticking to myself, not going out partying or going to the bars every Friday night like everybody else is going to, or I could just go down that route with them to make myself cool and fit in.
And there's always two paths. You have the human depravity and sin nature, and then you have the right way to go. And the human depravity and sin nature is always more fun. You're always going to have the most fun doing this.
At least at first, right?
Yeah,
at
first. You're not going to think about it much. You're not going to think about it as much, but like, as time goes on and as you mature, you're going to realize where you went wrong with that.
And you have consequences to pay for doing it.
Oh, yeah.
How do you factor human depravity into, well, since we all just did world history together, how do you see human depravity being a player in world history?
the lust for power and like, money, basically. I mean, that's basically how you could sum up a lot of, like, a lot of wars, how they started and stuff.
Power and land.
Yeah, basically, a lot of people wanted to be something, and they were willing to be that person at any end. And I mean, like with Napoleon, he was willing to conquer multiple countries, kill hundreds and thousands of people. Who else?
Did you see, because I talked about this on the very first day of class, and I would have mentioned Solomon, and like there's nothing new under the sun, and new news is old news happening to new people. Did you guys, factoring in human depravity, did you guys see, did you kind of pick up on the almost repetitiveness
Yes, sir.
of life on Earth?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
sir. I mean, especially if, you look at it into like a military aspect.
Yeah, because that's, you love military history.
I mean, yes, sir. So, I mean, like, it's basically someone just wants to conquer, someone wants more land. They point at this and be like, I want that. Adolf Hitler pointed at Czechoslovakia, said, I want that. He got that. I want Poland. He got that. Napoleon pointed at Persia. I want that. He tried to take it.
No one's ever satisfied with what they get. They always want more power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How does that, looking at world history, how does that help you look at the world today?
I mean, it's still the same. Nobody's ever really truly satisfied. I mean, Jeff Bezos, he's always trying to gain more money, trying to make the most amount of profit, treating Amazon workers poorly. He's just trying to make the most he can. He's never satisfied with what he has. He can't just stop and be like, oh, I think I've done enough. Or like, I can make it more fair for everybody else I've made enough money. I can make it more fair for all my workers or stuff like that. Stuff like that. I mean, people are always just trying to, they're especially lustful for money, especially in the United States, the capitalist system, those big tycoons and stuff, they're always trying to get the extra dime.
Yeah. Do you think they're all bad?
No, I don't think they're all bad, but truly, I don't try to make an assumption off of someone, what I've seen online, because, you could truly meet them in person. They'll be the nicest person you ever met.
Mm-hmm.
So I try not to make that assumption, but from a business aspect, from that, I can make an assumption from, and from what I've seen from a business aspect, they can be a little cruel at times.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully you understand that there's always, Dylan, you kind of alluded to this earlier, that there's the back and the forth. There's you can choose human depravity, or you can choose to do the right thing, and back and forth it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we're talking about countries or leaders or businesses or Jeff Bezos or Donald Trump, I don't care. Pick your entity, pick your person. Everybody's going to deal with both sides of that. That's like one of the things is, if somebody in class would say, well, all Republicans are all Democrats, I'd be like, hold on a second. You literally can't say that unless you know every single Democrat in the country or every single Republican. Do you? And of course, nobody can answer that question. Yes. And say, then you can't possibly say that. All rich people are this, all white people are that, all Hispanics are this, all liberals are that, all gay people are the other thing. You can't do it. Because only from my perspective, only God has absolute knowledge. So the rest of us, like, you need to chill out a little bit. On that note, what have you guys, being in class, what have you learned about Christianity and how a Christian should engage the world around them? Because this will be a different perspective, obviously, from you, Dylan, than from you, Andrew. But just like, how has that impacted your perspective of Christianity? The way that we would operate in class. Dylan, I'll start with you.
That they should be graceful, but also be very set in their ways. The way you speak to people, you have to be understanding. Just like you, for example, you have to be understanding of where I stand, but you also have to be set in your ways of what you believe. You can't let me push you one way or another. You have to be set.
Yeah, but willing to consider things.
Right.
So, I have the courage of my convictions, but
I feel like
sorry. Go ahead.
Most people I've talked to, they're not willing to listen. They're set in their ways. They're like, you're wrong. You don't believe in this. You're a sinner. You should convert. But they're not willing to listen to what I have to say.
Yeah.
They're only focused on their one goal, and they're very pushy. They try to shove it down your throat.
Yeah.
They don't want to consider anything other than what they believe. They think that they're 100% right all the time.
Do a lot of Christians that you've been around, Dylan, how do you think they look at you?
So I think me personally, I think the church is a lot of hypocrites, to be honest, because I feel
Well,
like
always has been.
myself and a majority of the church were about the same. There's a few that might live a little bit better or whatever, but most of the time I'm the same as majority of the people in the church. But they, just because I don't believe what they believe, they assume that they're better than me, and they think.
Are you talking about like other kids that go to church that are your age,
I'm talking about adults as well.
essentially living kind of the same way
Yes,
that
yes,
you
sir.
choose to live?
Yes, sir. And I tend to find that's what drives me away from church, is because I don't want to be one of those people that are hypocrites, that think I'm better
Right.
just because I believe in this one thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Andrew?
I mean, he basically hit what I was about to say, but like one thing I would like to say more is like, you gotta treat people with love. You really do. I mean, sometimes like I'll be walking out of these conversations with people, they're gonna still believe in what they believe in, but if I can make a bigger impact, trying to show them the Christian way of being nice and loving and treating everybody like your neighbor, that'll make an impact, and it'll keep that question going on in their mind. Because we live in a cruel world nowadays, and if you can leave that impact on someone, then eventually that might open up the door for them to go explore it themselves. So, I mean, that's one thing I've kind of walked out as, like, treat people with love, treat everybody with love, no matter who, what, how they identify as. Treat everybody with love. I may not agree with it completely, but I'm going to treat you exactly how I treat everybody else. I mean, this has been one thing that's came up in my work a few weeks ago. We recently hired somebody. Their pronouns were they, them. She would get mad if it was obviously a girl. She would get mad if you refer to her as a her. And I was like, well, I truly don't agree with that, but I'm going to try to treat her the best I can without trying to break my moral code and stuff. So I wouldn't refer to her as she or they or them. I would just use her name. I just would not be like, oh, she told me that. I'd be like, oh, Suds over there told me that. I would try to be as respectful as I could, without truly trying to break my own moral compass and stuff. And I mean, it opened the gateway to us having conversations about stuff like that.
Yeah, that's good.
To go back to what I was saying, I feel like most people use church as an ego boost to make themselves feel better about themselves. That's one of my biggest problems with it.
Yeah, and I would push back on that the way I was talking about this a couple minutes ago. Is be careful to separate the opinion of people that you've actually interacted with, as opposed to your opinion of people that you don't even know. I mean, to a certain extent, every single Christian on the planet that's ever existed other than Christ himself was a hypocrite. Because the hypocrite is just when you fall short. There was a guy that wrote a book years ago called Rules for Radicals. And just a brilliant, uber liberal, atheistic, political, Saul Alinsky was his name. And one of his 10 points on Rules for Radicals was use your enemy's rules against them, because nobody ever lives up to their own set of rules. Which is, since I read that the first time, I'm like, yeah, dude, I can take you into the scripture, which was written a couple thousand years before you wrote that, and show you the same thing. There's none righteous, no, not one. So a Christian sits there, I know the righteous one, I know the lawgiver, I know the guy that kept the law, and nobody else is going to be able to. So I think the hypocrite thing comes in, Dylan, when people will project and talk and look down at you, where they don't seem to have any humility about their own faults.
Right.
Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes, sir. I mean,
go ahead.
I can kind of attest to this as well. I mean, I've always grown up claiming to be a Christian and stuff. I always haven't lived nobody lives perfectly. I've had my fair share of.
I don't.
Yeah, I've had my fair share of fun and stuff, done stuff, and people are always like, they're like, oh, how can you be a Christian when you've done stuff like that?
Right.
Or like stuff like that, and they always try to put you down lower than them. So,
well, that's why Jesus was talking about, before you remove the speck of dust from your brother's eye, you might want to remove the plank from your own. So it's almost like I've always pictured I've got a big 2x4 sticking out of my eye. And then I notice something about you, Andrew, or something about you, Dylan, or somebody else. And I'm like, oh, well, let's talk about that. So that you clearly have some sinful thing. And I'm focusing on that while I have a 2x4 stuck out of my eye. And Jesus's point in that was, hey, you should be a lot more concerned with your own sin than with anybody else's, because you're responsible for your own, which is why it should be a big deal. It's a big plank. It's like a 2x4 sticking out of your eye. The other guy's sin relative to me and my responsibility as a Christian is like a speck of dust. It's just a little sliver. He's got a sliver in his eye. And God's like, hey, Steve, do you want me, and there's scripture behind this one too. Do you want me to hold you under the same spotlight that you're putting that guy under? Like, what size microscope do you want me to put him under? Oh, use the big one, Lord. Here, 100 times. Use this one. Here's a good lens. 100 times. And he says, okay, fine. I'll use 100 times magnification on that guy over there. But don't go anywhere, Steve, because in a second, I'm going to take him off the microscope stand and I'm going to stick you under there. And I'm going to look at your life with 100 times magnification. Are you comfortable with that? And any honest Christian at that point would say, no, I'd rather not do that. Okay, that's the whole point. And so I think Christians, whereas Dylan, to your point, the last thing we should be accused of is being proud or arrogant or self-inflating, when we know, if we're honest, that we fall so short of God's law that's like, but by God's grace, there go I, right? I'm a sinner. The difference between you and me, Dylan, bluntly, is I'm forgiven and you're not. But there's plenty of sin in my life. Mine's different than yours. Probably in some places it's the same. But I don't look at myself as being any better. I see myself as being forgiven, but I don't see myself as being better. And I think that's really important that Christians communicate that way. I want you guys to kind of tell people my age, parents, older people, 40s, 50s, 60s, about your generation. And what are the things that you see your generation struggling with? What do you guys and people your age, where are the problems? And then is there anything we can do to help you? Like, how would you prefer us to approach you or to talk to you? So giving us advice, but first tell us a little bit about what kind of problems and challenges do you see in your own generation?
So do you want us to be like complete 100% honest?
Get out of here if you're not going to be.
Okay. One thing for sure, definitely, is, this generation is big on, sex.
Yours?
Yes, sir. I mean, they're very big. I've met people who are younger than me, and they have as we call it, a body count. That's what they call. That's how many people you've slept with. And
so hookup culture is pervasive.
Oh,
yes.
Guys and girls both take pride in that.
Yes.
I mean, I noticed that last week when I was at Texas Tech. Some of the girls there, they were prideful of how many guys they've been with.
Yeah.
So that is one big thing for sure. There's no more real loyalty to sex till marriage or love anymore.
Yeah.
Another thing is drugs and drugs and alcohol and stuff. I mean, I know that's always been around, but I feel like the drugs have taken off a little bit more, because first and foremost, how easy they are to get with your phone and stuff. You can go on Snapchat and add a plug, as we call them. That's basically your drug dealer. Go add them and get your fix of whatever you want. And, they'll charge you and stuff. Go get that. It's just everything. And then, biggest.
It's super easy.
Yeah. I mean, one thing for sure is definitely the phones nowadays.
I was going to say, I said, it sounds like I might have said this in class. Here's what kept me in high school, just speaking bluntly, from being a over the top Roman whore. The only thing that kept me from that was it wasn't that easy to access girls. So if I wanted to ask a girl out, I would have to do it in person, which is nerve-wracking, or I'd have to call their house. And when you call the house, you're like, hi, is Laura home? And you're scared to death that the mom or the dad or somebody else, you're hoping, I wasn't praying back then. I was hoping, oh man, I hope her sister answers. Anybody but the parent. But the parent answers, hello, Hi, may I please speak to Laura? May I ask who's calling? Oh, this is Steve Noble. And who are you? Oh, I go to school with Laura. Okay, hold on a second. So it wasn't that easy to communicate and access. But now because of the smartphone and the digital world, everything's at your fingertips.
Oh, yes,
literally, isn't it?
Oh, yes, sir, indeed. I mean, you can go and you can go find yourself a girlfriend in 2 weeks if you go on certain apps and stuff. You can find. I mean, even they encourage it with online dating stuff, Tinder.
Yeah. Piece of cake.
Yeah. What is it? What are the other ones?
Bumble.
Isn't there a gay one?
Bumble, whatever.
Oh, okay. Match.com.
Yeah.
You can go find them where so easily nowadays just through your phone. You don't have to I mean, that's even how I found I had a girlfriend from sophomore year up until the senior year and stuff. You know, I saw her at a swim meet. I had her on Snapchat, and we started talking from there.
Right. Yeah. So easy.
Oh yeah, it's so easy. Yeah.
So pervasiveness and easy access to drugs and the hookup culture. What else? What else do you think your generation's struggling with?
Lack of morality, I will say. Lack of morality and discipline.
A lot of lack of discipline.
Yeah, one comes out of the other. Is that your point, Dylan?
I feel like yes, yeah.
When you say lack of discipline, what do you mean?
I feel like everyone wants what they want without working for it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes.
I mean, I've noticed this with other friends, parents, and stuff. They'll go. Their parents will go buy them the nice, newest, shiniest thing in the world, and won't hesitate. Won't even think about it. Won't even care. Oh yeah, you want that? Oh yeah, here you go, my little princess. There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm any better. My parents, they've always they've given me what I've wanted or needed.
Sure.
But they've always made it understand you got to work for what you want. I mean, even when I turned 15, they're like, "You're old enough to work now. Go work. If you want that, go work." So I mean, at age 15, I started working and stuff. I mean, I was a junior. I was a coach before that at 13. So they're like, if you really want some extra money to go spend on stuff, go work for it. But I feel like nowadays,
does it seem to you guys that a lot of your peers have little to no work ethic?
Yes, sir. I mean,
and the job market sees that too as well. Like watch this. I grabbed this a couple days ago because even though I'm not on the radio, I'm still like this all the time. So here you go. This is your just a little bit older than you. During job interviews, employers say recent college graduates have. So this is recent college grads. So they're probably 22, 23, right? So they're 3-4 years older than you guys. 50 in interviews, okay, for professional jobs, 53% of them struggle with eye contact. 50% of them asked for unreasonable compensation. Like you want me to pay you how much? That kind of thing. 47% of them dressed inappropriately, meaning they didn't come dressed professionally. 27% used inappropriate language, which means they were probably cussing during the interview. 21% refused to turn the camera on during a virtual interview. And get this one, 19% brought a parent to their interview.
Yes, sir. Actually, it's funny you say that. My dad, he recently brought that to me. And, my dad's, he's proud of the way he was raised and stuff. Yeah. He's a boomer. He was born in 1964. Boomer. He was born right before the end of it. His dad was in Korea and stuff like that. Small southern town. So, and his dad was pretty tough on him. My dad wasn't as equally as tough on me, but he wanted me to be well respected in the world and stuff. So there were certain things he pushed on me very hardly. He said, you need to have interview experience. You need to do this. You need to look like this. You need to not say this. And he's like, also, I'm not going to be around forever. You got to be on your own. Stuff like that. And it really shows and sticks out now. Like when I was doing my college application and stuff, and I was talking to people, they were very impressed with my mannerism, like the way even down to the way I held someone's hand. Like it was perfect, professional and stuff. Looked them dead in the eyes when I spoke to them.
You mean you shook their hand?
Yes, sir.
You ain't holding my hand in an interview, bro.
this entire time.
That's what you said. Did you realize you said that? The way I'm holding their hand?
Yeah, when
This is the way you shook their hand.
Shook their hand and stuff like that. He's
Yeah.
always been like big on that, and it shows in today's society. I mean, even to this day, like I still get a lot of like people tell me, "Oh, your parents must have raised you right and stuff." Because I'll be like, "Oh, no, ma'am, no, sir." Even at my first job, my manager was literally, I was 15, she was 16. I still refer to her as ma'am and stuff like that.
Wow.
It sticks out.
You're both really good about that,
Yeah.
Andrew. Both you and Dylan, especially. I mean, I don't know how you talk to every other adult in your life, but you've always been incredibly respectful towards me. Yes, sir. No, sir. I mean, that sticks out like a sore thumb. As you know, most students aren't like that. And that will go a long way if you guys haven't learned that already. Just in interviews, situations, college, military, I don't care, wherever you go next. That kind of respect will buy you a lot of coinage in the business world and in the regular world in general.
Oh, yes. Yes, sir. It never mattered to my parents. Like they always said, if someone's put in a place of authority above you, no matter if you like them or hate them, you got to at least show them some respect.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was put to the challenge this year. For football, my athletic director did not get along with me at all. He just did not like the way I played. He did not like the way my attitude was on the field. And he just did not like anything about me. But he was put in a place of authority, so I still looked at him. I said, "Yes, sir. No, sir." I never tried to argue with him. It may have came out like I did a couple times, but I never truly tried to. It never was my intentions. I always try to respect him to the best of my ability, no matter what.
Yeah, that's good. What kind of what would your advice be to parents and stuff my age, just in terms of dealing with their own sons and daughters who are your age or younger, especially 8th grade on? Well, what would be your advice to parents on that one?
I don't think there's much you can do, because no matter what you do, their friends are going to have access. Someone around them is going to have access. I mean, my parents did a really good job of trying to keep me away from everything, but I still had friends that had access to everything. So it didn't matter if I had access. I had my friends who had access.
Yeah, so that's important for us to realize. Like I had a dad that came up to me at a homeschool convention. He's like, "I don't know that my daughter, she's 13. She's really innocent. We've kept her away from social media and blah, 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 blah. And I'm not sure she's ready to take one of your classes, because it seems like your classes, you're going to talk about some pretty serious issues. And it seems like your classes are pretty mature." And I said, "Okay, no disrespect. I'm thinking your 13-year-old daughter might not be generally as innocent as you think, because while you've controlled all those things at home," and this is to your point, Dylan, "you have no control over what all of her friends are thinking or seeing or doing. And so you don't know what's going on in her conversations with her friends. You know what she's doing when she's in your house, but you're not privy to all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. So there's a good chance she knows more than you think she does. And the things that she knows, she's probably not going to be comfortable bringing up in front of mom and dad,
right?
Because it might just be embarrassing." Right. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
I mean, if I had to tell anybody, teach your kids respect. I mean, just teach them general respect everybody. Be nice to everyone, because you don't know what someone's going through and stuff. There's been times where I've blown up at somebody. They didn't deserve it with what was going on behind the doors. But teach them a healthy respect of everything, of human life, people's attitudes, how things are made, how things are set up. Just teach them, honestly, just respect of how stuff is set up. I mean, a lot of these people nowadays, they grow up very arrogant and stuff. They think, "Oh, I know it all." I mean, I act like that all the time. My mom constantly reminds me of that. She acts like she constantly tells me, "You think you know it all." She's like, "Oh, there's no need for you to go to college, since we got Albert Einstein in the house over here." Like, anytime it comes into an argument and I start winning, she's like, "Oh, we got Albert Einstein over here, or we got Matthew McConaughey from It's a Time to Kill over here with the way he's talking." But just teach them just respect. I feel like that's so lost in today's culture.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Even
Dylan, what do you think? Just generally kind of stuff like Andrew's talking about.
I mean, respect is a big one. I mean, you got to teach them to make the right decisions for themselves. I mean, because there are always going to be temptations. and you have to raise them so they know what's right and what's wrong and why it's right and wrong, so that hopefully they'll make the right decision.
Yes.
Yeah, that the why question is a big one.
Yeah, a lot.
And not just, hey, do what I say because.
Right.
But why? Why is this good for you? And that's one of the things, like with ethics and stuff, I try to communicate. Hey, when God says do this and don't do that, it's not because he's some curmudgeon up there in heaven sitting on his throne with his long white beard going, I don't want anybody to have any fun. He actually cares about you. So when he says don't do that, he's saying don't do that because you're going to harm yourself. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt other people. There's bad fruit there. To your point from way earlier in this conversation, Dylan, yeah, right up front, sin is fun, feels good, satisfies you in the moment. But especially if you're a Christian, even if you're not a Christian, guilt and shame are waiting for you because of your conscience, which I would argue is part of being made in the image of God. But especially if you're a Christian and you got that pesky little Holy Spirit going on, you're always going to end up in guilt and shame. And you're always going to go back. I can't believe I did that again. Why did I do that again? Here I am, Lord, confessing the same thing for the millionth time. And most Christians, if they're honest, will express that frustration. Last thing that I want you guys to speak about real quick is for parents that are watching this who are contemplating putting their student in one of my classes. What would you tell them? And not just, hey, do it, but if you think they should enroll them in my classes, why? Like, what's your words of encouragement to them in terms of considering putting their kids in my classes?
Truly, mine is, it will make your kid think. It'll make them think about the education they're getting. It'll make them just think about questions they have, and they're truly in an environment where they can ask these questions and not be judged upon or have some downgrading spot. Like, I know you mentioned this earlier in one of your classes at World History. You said, I encourage all of y'all to take a philosophy class. That's going to be your most aggressive professor there. And if you don't agree with them on everything, they might bump down your grade and stuff like that. It's good to just go ahead and have that experience, because especially majority kids coming into high school, they're looking into going to college and stuff. And when you go to college, there's a wide pool of people. There's so many people there. So you're going to have those questions, and it's better to go ahead and start learning about it when you're younger and stuff, and go ahead and have that stuff start reinforcing your mind, know what you're believing in and why you believe in it before you get there. And it's like, I was just told to believe in that. I never asked why, and then you have somebody change your views just like that. It's just that's really all I gotta say about that class. I mean, it's truly just a great environment. And they will have everything, like anything they need answered, they can just ask it. Even any class, civics, ethics, world history, they can just ask. They can be like, oh, why did we set up the government so the minority doesn't get messed up when the minority should be if they lost the vote? Stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Dylan, what do you think?
I agree with Andrew. I mean, it really just teaches you what you believe, and it teaches you how to have a good friendly argument with someone. How you can agree but find common ground as well, and learn how to talk through things. Because that definitely that's one of the biggest things I learned in your class was how to talk through something when we both disagree with each other, but we can find common ground somewhere.
Has it, one last question. I know I just said that. How has being in my classes changed your perspective on, for you, Andrew, being a Christian, and for you, Dylan, just Christianity in general? How has being in my classes impacted your perspective? For you, Andrew, as a Christian, and for you, Dylan, somebody looking at Christians or Christianity?
For me, most definitely, it's opened my opinion or opened my mind more to the Christian worldview. Because when I took your classes, I was a gung-ho conservative. I believed in this, 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 and this. If you didn't think in that, you're wrong, you're stupid, stuff like that. It taught me to be more loving and more patient with my views, hear out why other people have them. And it honestly just made me learn more of like a self-respect on why someone would believe in that, and other than my view, and like how can I have these conversations with them. But yes, sir. I mean, for the most part,
I saw that in you. What took God 12 years to show me, which were when you first came in, you were all truth and no grace, which is exactly what I was for a while. All truth and no grace. I could pound the pulpit all day long and tell you exactly what I thought, tell you why you were wrong. I could make a biblical case for it. But I didn't really care about the person on the other side of the argument. I didn't look at them as somebody made in the image of God that Jesus died for just as much as he died for me. So I had all truth, but no grace. But I've seen that change in you over the last 4 years.
Yes, sir.
Where
I mean, like,
you came all gung ho, and now you're talking about loving people and listening. That wasn't Andrew Green 4 years ago.
no, sir.
So that's encouraging. Dylan?
I mean, you just made me ponder. I mean, you make me think. I've thought about all the stuff we've talked about in class. I mean, even though class is over, I still think about everything we've talked about. And I know that if I ever had questions, I could still call you. I could still hit you up. I could still email you. I have your phone number. You give me your phone number. So
And I hope you will.
And I know that no matter what happens in life or what I decide, you'll always be there for me.
Yeah.
That actually gave us another podcast idea. Next year.
It did?
Yes, sir. I mean, we've had this idea. We've like, why don't we do the podcast
That's
before
funny.
we go off to our own routes, and then 1 year later, once we come back, have them.
See, that's good. That reminds me. I did that with Hayden and his best friend JD. So I did it after although Hayden's school year was different. I did it, I think, after their freshman year. And I'm like, okay, now you guys both grew up in the Southern Baptist Church and these evangelical families. Now that you've been off to school for a year, give us a little insight. That's a great idea. So we'll definitely plan on that. No matter you going off to school, whatever you do next, Dylan, we'll plan on doing this a year from now.
Awesome.
And we'll just see what's going on.
Yes, sir.
I think that's a great idea, and just kind of track what's happening. So one last question, Dylan, on the Christian thing. Are you a little slower to assume that all Christians are this or all Christians are that
Most
than you
definitely.
were a couple of years ago?
For sure. Because I only had bad conversations or conflicts with Christians before that.
Yeah.
And then me and Andrew, we've been able to talk through stuff, figure out common ground. You hear me out, I hear you out. It's always just been good.
Yeah.
And I always enjoy
That's
arguing with you as well.
Amen. Well, yeah, if you hang out with me long enough, we're probably going to end up in a little back and forth, which, even though it doesn't always sound like it, is kind of part of my love language. But anyway, it's been great being with you guys. I really appreciate you asking and then taking the time to be here. It's been just a great joy to not only be your teacher, but for that to develop into the friendship that we have today. And I just thank God that he brought you guys into my life and that we've had this interaction for the last 3 or 4 years. And I believe that it will continue. And it's been a huge blessing to me and an honor to be able to play this role in your life. And I care about you guys and I love you. And I can't thank you enough.
Yes, sir. I mean, we feel the exact same. Thank you very much for being our teacher. Being a very impactful teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Always being willing to hear us out and stuff. Always answering questions about everything. And you can't really ask much more for that.
No.
Sounds good to me. All right. Thanks, you guys. Love and appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. We'll talk again.
All right. Bye-bye.
See ya.
See ya.